My name is Michael Carter, and I need to tell you something that I have kept inside for almost 2 years. Not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because every time I tried to say it out loud, my hands would shake and my voice would crack. But I cannot stay silent anymore, because what happened to me on that operating table changed everything I thought I knew about life, about death, and about what is waiting for us on the other side. I was dead for 9 minutes. The doctors confirmed it. 9 minutes where my heart produced no beat, where my lungs drew no air, where by every medical definition, I was gone. But I was not gone. I was somewhere else. And what I saw standing at the foot of my hospital bed when I came back was something that no doctor, no nurse, no one in that room could explain. And it terrified me in a way that nothing in my 43 years of life ever had. Let me take you back to where it started. Because the strangest part about the day I died is how ordinary it began. It was a Thursday in late November, the kind of morning where the cold bites your face the second you step outside. I remember standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee into the same chipped mug I had used for years. My wife Laura was upstairs getting our daughter ready for school, and I could hear them laughing about something through the ceiling. I stood there listening to that sound, and I remember thinking, I need to remember this moment. I do not know why that thought came to me. I had no reason to believe anything was wrong, but something in me just wanted to hold on to that laughter like my soul already knew what my mind did not. I had been having chest pains for about 3 weeks before that morning. Nothing dramatic, just a tightness that came and went, like someone pressing a fist against my sternum. Laura had been telling me to see a doctor, and I kept brushing it off the way men do. I told her it was stress. I told her it was the cold weather. I told her everything except the truth, which was that deep down I was scared, because the pain was getting worse, and I did not want to hear what a doctor might say. But that Thursday morning, something was different. The tightness was not coming and going anymore. It was just there, constant, like a weight sitting on my chest. I dropped Laura and my daughter off, and instead of driving to work, I drove to the hospital. I told myself I was just being cautious. They ran tests, blood work, an EKG, and within an hour the energy in the room shifted. The nurse who had been casual and friendly suddenly looked serious. She left and came back with a cardiologist, and the way he looked at me, I knew this was not going to be a simple visit. He told me I had a blockage, a significant one, and that they needed to operate soon, not next week, not tomorrow, soon, as in that afternoon. I called Laura, and I will never forget the silence on the other end of the phone before she said, I am on my way. 3 hours later, I was lying on a gurney being wheeled into an operating room, and the fluorescent lights passing overhead felt like a countdown. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7. The last thing I saw was the surgeon adjusting his mask, and then nothing. Just black. Complete and total darkness. But here is the thing about that darkness. It did not feel empty. It felt like a room I had not found the light switch for yet. And then something happened that I still cannot fully put into words. The darkness started to move. It was not just absence of light anymore. It had texture. It had depth. It was like being submerged in deep water. Except I could breathe. Or maybe I did not need to breathe. I could not feel my body at all. No weight, no temperature, no heartbeat. Just awareness. Pure awareness floating in this vast, dark space. And for a moment I panicked. I thought, is this it? Is this death? Just nothing? Just floating alone forever? But then I heard something. It started faint, like a hum coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And as it grew louder, I realized it was not a hum. It was voices. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all speaking at once, but not in chaos. It was like a choir where every voice carried a different word, but somehow they all made sense together. And what they were saying, I cannot translate into English or any language I know, but the meaning of it poured into me like warm water filling a glass, And the meaning was, you are not alone. You were never alone. The darkness began to change. A light appeared, but not like flipping a switch. It was more like dawn breaking in slow motion, starting as a faint glow on the edges and then spreading inward. And as the light grew, I realized I was no longer floating. I was standing, and there was ground beneath me. Not dirt or concrete, but something solid made of light itself. Every step I took sent gentle ripples outward, like walking on the surface of still water. Ahead of me was a landscape I cannot describe without sounding crazy, because it was everything and nothing I had ever seen at the same time. There were colors I have no names for, colors that do not exist here, colors that carried emotions the way music does. One shade made me feel the way I felt the first time I held my daughter. Another shade carried the exact feeling of my grandmother singing in her kitchen when I was 6 years old. These were not just colors, they were memories made visible. And then I saw someone walking toward me. He was still far away, but I could feel him before I could see him clearly. It was like standing near a bonfire, the warmth reaching you before you are close enough to see the flames. And with every step he took, the world around me responded. The light grew warmer, the colors deepened, the ground beneath me steadied, as if his presence was the thing holding all of this together. When he was close enough for me to see his face, I dropped. I did not decide to kneel. My body just gave way, because I knew who he was, not from paintings, not from movies, not from any image I had ever seen in church, because he looked nothing like any of those. But I knew him the way you know your own mother's voice in a crowded room. Something in the core of my being recognized him, and that recognition brought me to my knees. It was Jesus. But I need to be honest with you. He was not what I expected. His presence was overwhelming in a way that was not intimidating, but undoing. Every wall I had ever built, every mask I had ever worn, every lie I had ever told myself, it all just collapsed in front of him. Not because he was judging me, but because in his presence there was no room for anything that was not true. He did not speak right away. He just looked at me, and in that look, I felt my entire life. Not just the events, but the weight of every moment, every choice, every word I had said or failed to say. It was all there, laid bare before him. And he saw it all. And what I felt from him was not anger, not disappointment. It was something I can only describe as knowing. He knew me completely, and he loved what he knew. "Michael," he said, and his voice was unlike any sound I had encountered. It was not loud, but it filled everything. It was the kind of voice that you do not just hear. You feel in your bones, in your blood, in whatever part of you is more than physical. He said, "I brought you here because there is something you need to see before you go back." Before I go back. I remember those words hitting me like cold water, because up until that moment, I had not been thinking about going back. I had not been thinking about the operating table, or my body, or the surgeons. I had been completely absorbed in where I was, and the idea of returning to that other life felt almost painful. But he smiled, and it was the saddest, most loving smile I have ever seen, as if he understood exactly what I was feeling. He raised his hand, and the world around us changed, like someone turning the page of a book. And suddenly, I was not in that landscape of light anymore. I was standing in what I can only describe as a corridor of time. On either side of me were scenes playing out, not on screens, but in the air itself, living, breathing moments from human history. I saw things I recognized, wars, cities, empires rising and falling. But I also saw things I had never learned about, civilizations I had no name for, moments of human greatness that somehow never made it into any textbook. And then the scenes narrowed, focused, and I was looking at something specific. I was looking at a hospital room, and in that room was a bed, and in that bed was me. I was seeing myself from above, lying motionless on the operating table, monitors flatlined, nurses moving with controlled urgency, a surgeon working with hands that were steady but fast, and I could hear one of them say clearly, "We are losing him." And then another voice, 9 minutes. He has been down 9 minutes. And I watched as they fought to bring me back, as they pushed electricity through my chest, as they refused to let me go. And I felt something strange. I felt gratitude, not for my life being saved, but for those people, for their refusal to give up, for the way they fought for a stranger on a table. Jesus stood beside me, watching the same scene. And then he said something that I think about every single day. "Michael, what you are about to see when you return is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you up." I did not understand what he meant. Not yet. Then the corridor of time collapsed, and I was somewhere else, somewhere I had never been and never imagined. A place that felt ancient, not in the way old buildings feel ancient, but in the way the ocean feels ancient, like it existed before language, before thought, before anything I knew. I was standing on the edge of something vast, looking out over what I can only call the divide. And on one side was light, warm, bright, alive. And on the other side was something else, not darkness exactly, but absence, like a place where light had been removed deliberately, surgically. Jesus pointed toward the absence and said, "This is what most people do not see. This is the space where truth gets buried, where memory is erased, where the things I intended for humanity get twisted and hidden." And I could see movement in that absence. Shapes. Things that were not human but were intelligent. And they were busy. They were working tirelessly, pulling threads of light and weaving them into knots, smothering sparks before they could catch fire. And I realized with a chill that what I was watching was a war. Not a war with weapons, but a war over what people are allowed to know about themselves. Jesus said, "They work hardest on those who are closest to waking up, the ones who start asking questions, the ones who feel that something is wrong but cannot name it. Those are the ones the darkness targets first, because one awakened soul can light a fire that nothing can extinguish." He showed me people throughout history who had woken up, who had seen through the lies and spoken truth, and I saw what happened to them. Some were silenced, some were ridiculed, some were erased from the record altogether. And I saw how the same patterns repeated, century after century, generation after generation. The same tactics, the same suppression, the same fear of what would happen if humanity actually remembered who it was. And then Jesus turned to me and said something that broke me wide open. He said, "Michael, you are not here by accident. You were never an accident. Your pain, your fear, the 3 weeks of chest pains that brought you to that hospital today, all of it was leading you here, because I need you to see this, so that when you go back, you will not be able to unsee it." I wanted to stay. I told him that. I said, "I do not want to go back. I do not want to return to a world that is that broken." And he looked at me with those eyes that held everything, every joy and every sorrow that had ever existed. And he said, "That is exactly why you must." He told me that the world was entering a time of choosing, that things people had accepted as normal were about to be shaken, that systems built on lies were going to crack, and that when they did, people would have a choice. They could cling to the old structures out of fear, or they could step into something truer, something harder, but infinitely more real. He said, "The shaking has already begun. Most people just have not felt it yet, but they will." He showed me what was coming, not specific dates or events, but patterns, waves of awakening followed by waves of resistance, truth surfacing, and then forces working overtime to push it back down. And he told me that the outcome was not decided, that it depended on people, on individual choices, on whether enough souls would choose courage over comfort. Then he said something I carry with me like a stone in my pocket. He said, "Michael, tell them that I am not distant. I am not watching from far away. I am as close as their next breath. I have always been that close. They just stopped listening. And then it happened. I felt a pull, like a rope tied to my chest, yanking me backward, and the world of light and truth and overwhelming love began to dissolve, and I was falling, not through air, but through layers of reality, like crashing back through the surface of water after being held under. And then pain. Pain like I had never felt before. My chest was on fire. My lungs were screaming. My body felt like it had been hit by a truck. And there were sounds, beeping, shouting, someone saying, "He is back! He is back!" And I opened my eyes to those fluorescent lights and the faces of strangers who looked at me like I was a miracle. But here is the part I have never told anyone until now. They stabilized me, moved me to recovery. Laura was there, holding my hand, crying. And I was trying to form words, trying to tell her what I had seen, but nothing would come out. And then they moved me to a room, a regular hospital room, and they dimmed the lights. And Laura fell asleep in the chair beside me, and I lay there in the dark, trying to process what had happened to me, and that is when I saw it. At the foot of my bed, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It was not a doctor. It was not a nurse. It was not anyone who belonged in that hospital. And it was not Jesus either. This was something different, something I had never seen before. And the moment I laid eyes on it, every hair on my body stood up. It was tall, taller than any person should be, and it was made of light, but not the warm golden light I had seen on the other side. This was white light, sharp and precise, like lightning frozen in the shape of a person. And it had wings, not feathered wings like in paintings, but structures of light that extended outward and upward, folding and unfolding slowly, as if breathing. And its face, I could not look directly at its face, not because it was terrible, but because it was too much, like trying to stare at the sun. Not out of danger, but out of sheer overwhelming radiance. I knew what it was. It was an angel, and it was standing at the foot of my bed, watching me. I could not move. I could not speak. I could not breathe. And then it did something that shattered me completely. It spoke, not with words, not with sound, but directly into my mind. And what it said was this: "You have been shown the truth. Now you must decide what you will do with it. We are here not because you are special, but because what you carry matters. There are forces that will try to make you forget what you saw tonight. There are forces that will try to convince you it was a dream, a hallucination, a side effect of anesthesia. Do not let them. You were dead, and you were brought back, and you were brought back for a reason." And then it said one more thing. And this is the part that haunts me, the part I think about at 3 in the morning when I cannot sleep. It said, "The war is closer than you think, and you are already in it." And then it was gone. Not slowly, not fading, just gone, like a light switching off. And I was alone in that dark hospital room with my sleeping wife, and the beeping of machines and a truth so heavy I did not know how I would ever carry it. The next morning, when the sun came through the window, I thought for one brief second that maybe it had been a dream. Maybe the anesthesia had done something to my brain. Maybe I was just processing trauma the way the mind sometimes does, through vivid hallucination. But then I looked at the foot of my bed, and on the floor, right where the angel had stood, was a mark. A scorch mark, about 2 feet wide, burned into the hospital linoleum. I stared at it, and then I looked at Laura, who was waking up, and I said, "Do you see that?" She looked down, and her face went white. She said, "What happened here?" And I did not have an answer, not one she would believe. The nurses came in, and they saw it too. And there was confusion, and maintenance was called, and someone said it must have been an electrical issue. But I saw the way one of the older nurses looked at me. She did not say anything, but her eyes told me she knew something unexplainable had happened in that room. I went home 3 days later, and everything was different. The world looked the same, but I could not see it the same way anymore. Food tasted different. Sounds hit me differently. I would look at people on the street and feel this overwhelming wave of compassion mixed with grief, because I knew something they did not. I knew that there was more to this life, so much more. And most people were sleepwalking through it, chasing things that would not matter, building lives on foundations that would not hold. I tried to go back to normal. I tried to return to work, to routine, to the comfortable numbness of daily life. But I could not, because every night, when the lights went off, I would feel it. That presence, not the angel exactly, but an awareness that I was being watched over, that something was expecting something from me. And that voice kept echoing in my mind. The war is closer than you think. I started talking about it, first to Laura, then to my brother, then to a few close friends. The reactions were what you might expect: concern, confusion, gentle suggestions that I talk to someone professional. But a few people listened, really listened. And when they did, something happened. Their eyes would change, like something was stirring inside them, something that had been asleep. And I realized that was the point. That was why I was sent back. Not to convince everyone, but to find the ones who were ready to hear it. So here I am, telling you. Because if you have made it this far into my story, something in you recognized it. Something in you knows that the world is not what it pretends to be, that there is a war happening beyond what your eyes can see, and that you are part of it, whether you know it or not. Jesus told me that he is as close as your next breath, and I believe him, because I died on that table, and he was there waiting, not with judgment, not with anger, but with a love so complete that 9 minutes in its presence changed me more than 43 years on this earth ever could. And the angel at the foot of my bed, it was not there to scare me. It was there to remind me that what I saw was real, that the mission I was given matters, and that the time to speak is now, not tomorrow, not when I feel ready, now. So I am asking you the same thing I was asked. What will you do with the truth? Will you let the noise of the world drown it out? Will you convince yourself this is just a story, just another video, just words on a screen? Or will you let it in? Will you sit with it? Will you ask yourself why this found you today? Because I do not believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Something brought you here. And if you are feeling something right now, if there is a stirring in your chest, a whisper in the back of your mind, a feeling that you were meant to hear this, then listen to it. Do not push it away. Do not rationalize it away. That feeling is the same thing I felt on that operating table, right before the darkness gave way to light. This is not the end of my story, and I do not think it is the end of yours either. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the truth does not spread on its own. It moves through people, through voices, through courage, and right now courage is the most important thing any of us can have. My name is Michael Carter. I was dead for 9 minutes, and I came back with a message. The war is real, the love is real, and the time is now.